After the interview, check out Zach's GoFundMe page and his dreams of competing in adaptive snowboarding competitions around the world.
So I would love to introduce Zach Sherman and would love for you to hear his story.
So 7 years ago, I was in a motorcycle accident, and we were at a friend's house, and we decided, because I had my motorcycle, that it would be safer to drive downtown, park the bikes, walk to the bar, and drink, than it would be to drink at the friend's house and then try and ride the bike home. Unfortunately, I never made it downtown. I wrecked my bike on the way. Speed was definitely a factor. I was going in excess of, they said, somewhere between 130 and 140 miles an hour. It was me and my friend behind me on his bike, and then we had an SUV filled with people. Yeah. And we were taking all them downtown as well. So, you know, we're driving down the highway, going super fast, just me and my buddy on our bikes. And I started to get a little, like, wobble on the bike. And they call it kind of like a speed wobble.
It was windy.
No, just from the speed itself, like the bike kind of starts to get a little bit of a shimmy to it. Of like tank slap, where like one leg slaps the tank and then the other leg, and it kind of just gains momentum.
Yeah. Wow.
So from there, I just started thinking, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to wreck, and I need to find a safe place to land. Like, I need to land in the grass over there, or
you realized that already. Oh god.
And the next thing I remember was the paramedic taking my helmet off.
That's
and I was like, my name is Zach Sherman.
At least you had a helmet.
Yeah, yeah.
Good
I mean, that was the only protective gear other than my gloves that I had on that night. Because, like I said, I was dressed to go out to party. Wasn't really dressed to be riding the bike in the middle of July. But, you know, he pulled my helmet off. I said my name. I told him my allergies. I told him I was a diabetic, and I was like, you know, call my mom. And he was just like, do you know where you are? And I'm like, yeah, I'm laying in the highway between this exit and this exit.
You remembered all of it, thanks to helmet.
Yep. And he was like, yeah, you can't get up. Just stay where you are right now.
Wow.
And that was the last thing I remembered. Until I woke up in the hospital, you know, a few weeks later. But, you know, my friends that were there, you know, they called 911.
Of course.
Some bystanders, like, you know, they stopped. They put tourniquets on my limbs to help stop the bleeding. You know, they were using cell phone cords. And,
Oh, wow.
And the belts from their pants, like anything they could to
stop bleeding.
To stop the bleeding, yeah. So, you know, if it wouldn't have been for them, who knows if I'd be sitting here talking to you. But then, you know, the paramedics got there. They were just off the exit, getting gas in the ambulance as it were.
God!
So, like, you know, they got the phone call.
It's crazy.
And they're like, yeah, it's right there. Like, it's right off the exit. We know exactly where he's at. And so they get on the highway, and I'm laying there. They rushed me to the hospital. I went to Hershey Med Center. And I don't remember it. Like I said, the only thing I remember is talking to the paramedic, but apparently I was talking the whole way to the hospital in the back of the ambulance, you know, and they got me there, and they're like, you know, who's this? And they're like, oh, this is the triple amputee that we called in, you know.
Triple? Is that already
Yep,
announced?
it all happened, you know, at the scene. So they were like, we definitely didn't think that he would have survived making it here. So they're like, you know, clear an operating room, clear whatever they had to do. And I had 2 back-to-back surgeries that were 12 hours, and then they pulled me out of, you know, being under. and then I had another 12-hour surgery, and then they put me in a medically induced coma to kind of like give my body time to rest. I believe it lasted like a week, maybe a week and a half, and I was in a coma for that time. Yeah, you know, and then I woke up, and it's all kind of a blur because you're on so many pain meds and you're like so confused, and it was all just kind of like a fog.
Oh yeah.
And you didn't know what was a dream and what was real at the time.
Reality, yeah.
Yeah, like...
You still didn't realize you lost your...
No, and I mean, I woke up a few times and I would ask like weird things like, where's all the presents? And then I'd like pass back out. And my, you know, mom, my sister, just friends that were there were like, what is he talking about? Like...
What presents?
And of course, you know, that was a dream that I was having that just seemed so surreal that I didn't know where I was. But one of the times I woke up, and I remember trying to like reach my nose or my face because it itched, and I tried reaching. I tried reaching with my right arm,
and you realized it's not there.
Nothing was happening, and I was like, "Why am I not scratching my nose? Like it feels like I'm scratching my nose, but I'm not." And then I tried moving my left arm, and my left arm was restrained because apparently. Because of like not knowing where I was and stuff, I kept pulling the tubes out.
Oh yeah.
So they had to restrain my arm so I would stop pulling the tubes out, you know, whenever I'd come awake. And
when you realized that you lost both of your legs and your
they actually had like they waited until I was awake and like a little bit more alert, and then they had the doctors come by, my mom, her husband, and I think somebody else was there, but I can't remember. I don't know if my sister was there or not. But you know, they had me laying in the hospital bed, and they're like, "So you had an accident, do you remember?" And I'm like, "A little." Like, where was I? And they're like, "You know, you're on 83, and around this exit." And I'm like, "No, that doesn't sound familiar." And they're like, "Oh, well, that's normal to have a little bit of amnesia and be confused about where you were and everything." And they're like, you know, you lost both your legs and your arm.
Okay, now stop here. They told you right there.
Yep.
You lost both of your legs.
Yeah.
And your right arm. What did you feel? Did you start thinking about you don't want to leave? You making plans to do something about this? What was your first thought?
Like I said, it's hard to really remember.
You probably didn't
I think
believe them. You thought it was like a joke.
Yeah, there was a lot of like, are they for real? Like I know that my mom and her husband are, you know, practical jokers. They joke about everything. They have a sick sense of humor. And I was like, is this a joke? Like, is this another dream? Because everything was such a surreal dream. I'm like, is this another one of these dreams? And they're like, no, this actually happened. And I'm like, what the hell? You know what I mean? You're just like,
that's
what?
Your first
why did this happen to me? You know, you go through that stage, and I feel like
it happen to you?
I feel like anyone that's in a situation like that goes through that stage. Like, why did this happen to me? And then, you know, I was in the hospital for like 6.5 months, so you have a lot of time with your thoughts. And the first thing they do is they bring, you know, a therapist in, and they're like, you know, let's talk about it. And I'm like, you know, I don't want to talk about it. It's still so new. And in the beginning, you're trying to absorb as much as you can, learning about your new self. But at the same time, you're trying to reject that as well because you don't want that to be the new you.
You don't want to believe that, what happened.
So like the first 6.5 months being in the hospital, like, and it being very real, you know, I was in for like 2 months straight every morning. First one in the operating room, just to try and like put Humpty back together again, so to speak. You know what I mean? Like they had to do wound washouts. They had to do revisions. You know, there was an infection in my left leg. It was originally below the knee, and they had to re-amputate it above the knee to get rid of the infection, so the infection itself didn't kill me. And then after the 6.5 months in the hospital, it was like 2 months in a physical rehab facility down in Philadelphia.
What hospital was that?
That was McGee Rehabilitation
In
Hospital.
Philadelphia. Okay.
And, you know, they were great. It was a great facility. I just wasn't in the mindset to be there yet.
Nobody would.
I was just like, you know, like, I'm not going to be able to do this. I'm not going to be able to do that. This is BS. This is... And I was so weak at the time, too, because I was laying horizontal in a hospital bed for the first maybe 5 of those 6.5 months.
5 months.
So I think at my smallest weight, I was down to like 75 pounds.
Oh my God.
And before my accident, I was 6'1", 145, 150 pounds. And to be at that like small and frail of a weight, like literally any task leaves you breathless, you know? And so then it was like 2 months in rehab, then it was a month back home, then it was a couple more months in the hospital with a surgery, you have a revision, then put you back in the rehab for a couple months, then, you know, back and forth and back and forth. And so like there was no stable foundation for me. There was no like, you're here every day. There was no routine.
No routine. But you had family and friends to help you at all?
Yeah, in the beginning, there was a lot of help from my support group. You know, my mom...
What's your support group?
My mom and her husband at the time let me move into their house. And she was my primary caregiver, you know, while I was in their house. I stayed there for about 6 months. And then I had another leg revision on my right leg, and afterward, I think something had happened with my mom, like she had broken her wrist or something was going on, and in the interim, they put me in a nursing home.
Oh, you stayed in the nursing home?
Yeah, so I was in a nursing home for, I want to say 8 months.
How was that? Is it here in Harrisburg? Or?
No, it was in York.
New York?
It was called Manor Care.
Oh, okay. It's a chain. It's a chain.
It's a chain, yeah. It was terrible, you know.
Why was it terrible?
It's just, it was a real, how do you want to, it was a real like...
Here's your water, goodbye.
No, it was just like, as far as like morale boosters go, it was the complete opposite. You know, I was put in a place where the only people that were my age were the people that were helping, you know. The CNAs, the nurses were my age. All the patients there were in their 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, you know. And so I didn't have anyone to really talk to unless people came to visit me. So it was a very like...
limited communication.
Yeah, I was almost like a little hermit at that point. Like, there wasn't a whole lot of the outside world. You know, I had a couple friends in the area that would come visit me regularly, get me out of the facility for the afternoon, you know, and then drop you there at night, and you're stuck there all over again. So it was like a time for me of like trying to figure out what my next step was going to be, because I didn't want to be in there anymore, and I didn't want to rely on, you know, the CNAs and the nurses to do everything for me, because, you know, they have 20-some patients apiece, and the last thing...
They're just thinking, when is my time to clock out?
Yeah. So it was one of those where I started learning how to do a lot more for myself, and... Which
is good.
Yeah.
You're very...
You know, the time that I spent in the rehab hospitals could have been better spent. You know, I could have learned more there, but I don't think I was in the right mindset yet. I didn't want to do everything for myself. I wanted people to wait on me hand and foot, because that's what I was used to for the last however long. And then that would have been...
How long? You said 8 months?
8 months, yeah. So that would have been around August in 2012, 2 years after the accident.
Right, so...
that I finally moved out of there and into an apartment.
So you got your own apartment?
Yeah, I had a roommate. One of the girls I used to bartend with.
Oh, that's nice.
We got an apartment together, and
you already
between her
had
and
all the devices to.
I had a set of prosthetic legs. It's not the set I have today. It was kind of it was a more difficult set of legs that they gave me in the beginning. I kind of demanded that I wanted to be tall like I was initially. You know, I was 6'1". I wanted to be as close to 6'1" as I could be. So they gave me a set of legs that made me like, I think like 5'7", 5'8", 5'9", somewhere in there. And they were super hard to walk on.
How long did it take you to learn how to walk on the prosthetic?
So I was up and walking a year after my accident. So like the 1 year anniversary of my accident, we had one of the fundraisers, the Legs and Kegs that I was telling you about.
Yeah.
And I actually walked in the threshold of that bar, like under my own power using a cane.
Really?
Yeah.
That's
I didn't walk very far, you know, maybe it was like 10, 15 feet, and then I was exhausted and then had to sit down, and then, you know, it was a hot day, so I was like, I don't even want to wear the legs, like just put me in my wheelchair and push me around. And that,
but you decided you were stronger than that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think it was 2 years after the accident, I was still suffering kind of the consequences of the latest revision of one of my limbs. So I was kind of in between prosthetic legs at the time. So, you know, at the 1 year mark, I was walking. At the 2 year mark, I wasn't walking. At the 3 year mark, I may have been walking again, but it was really intermittent.
Yeah.
And it was really touch and go in the first like 3-4 years.
So did you make any friends like yourself? Was, you know, the situation you appeared in?
I met a lot of different people along the way.
How did you meet them? Where?
Facebook was a big...
Facebook? Okay.
Facebook was a big influence and like start of like meeting amputees. Not everybody
is willing to probably talk about this.
Stories. Yeah, so I tried like local amputee support groups that the hospitals put on, and everybody at them for the most part was an older person missing one leg due to like an illness or a disease. And it was hard for me to connect and find people my own age that were amputees with similar situations.
Did you find any?
I found a few.
It was the same exactly situation? 2 legs and 1 arm?
So actually, while I was in the hospital the first time, like maybe 2-3 months after my accident, I got to meet a guy who, he was a triple amputee as well.
Wow.
His arm was amputated below the elbow, so he could wear an arm prosthesis and had a lot of dexterity with that arm prosthesis. That was one of the first prosthetic devices that I had, was an arm. And it was really heavy, and it was very limited range of motion. Like it always stayed out in front of me. I had no way to turn it inward. So it was like, it bent at the elbow, so I could do this, and I could raise the arm. And then I physically had to take my hand and turn the wrist whenever I wanted the wrist to turn.
Oh, no.
So between the weight of it and everything else, I just kind of gave up on it.
You decided not to.
And figured out how to do things one-handed, which was difficult because I was initially right-handed, so I had to relearn everything, you know. And initially I was like, oh, this isn't going to be so bad. Everything's on a computer these days. Like, I don't have to write anything. And it turns out that's not the case, you know. In the medical field anyways, everything has to be handwritten in triplicate, you know. So as opposed to just being able to on a computer, you're sitting in a doctor's office waiting room, you know, trying to fill out your name, like, as best you can with the opposite hand.
So you're doing well with your left hand now?
Yeah, I mean, I figured it out for the most part. I still don't like handwriting a lot.
Okay.
If I can avoid it, I will. You know, if I can if there's an online version of whatever I'm doing, I do the online version, whether it be
to make it
applications,
quickly and easy,
PDFs, you know.
So click.
Yeah.
Well, so you mentioned you have met somebody like yourself with triple amputation.
Yeah, his name was Brian Anderson.
Are you still in touch with him?
I haven't been in a few years, but he was one of the, I believe, either Iraq or Afghanistan
so that's
war
what
veterans.
that's his story. He probably was blown on bomb or...
I believe it was an IED that, like, you know, and he was actually in the hospital to meet me, like I said, like 2 or 3 months afterward, and he's like, you know, I drive, I do this, I have a job,
he was
I have a girlfriend.
you, right?
And yeah, he was the guy that came in and tried to, like, give me hope to the situation when, you know, I thought that all hope was lost. And
well, I do appreciate that people, like, you know, me in your life, in our all lives, there is somebody that always gives you hope and inspiration.
Yeah.
Inspire. Despite on any situation you have, they give you some kind of hope.
Yeah.
And strength, and that's what they want. And I do know you have hobbies and you have pets.
Yeah. I have 2 obnoxious dogs. And the first one I actually adopted through, like, a friend of a friend. Maybe.
When did you adopt it, before or after the accident?
After the accident.
After, okay.
Maybe like 4 months after I moved into that first apartment I was telling you about with my friend. You know, she was not really there a whole lot. She was always either working, out with friends, you know, living her life, which I fully understand. But it became kind of lonely for me because I didn't really have anyone or anything to do on a regular basis. So I was like, you know what? I need a pet. And I initially was going to rescue a greyhound from, like, the Philadelphia Greyhound Rescue.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember filling out the application, like, I had the dog picked out and everything, and I'm like, oh, it's like $200 fee to adopt this dog, and then I have to get it, all this stuff.
Oh, and then you...
And a friend of a friend was getting rid of her dog, you know, she was having a baby and had to get rid of the pet, and my friend's like, you know, this person has a dog they're willing to give you for free.
Oh, nice.
With all her toys, a crate, you know, everything, and I'm like,
oh, why not?
yeah, like, what kind of dog is it, you know, because I've never been a small dog person. I always like bigger dogs. And she's like, oh, it's a lab mix. And I'm like, oh, well, that's,
there you go.
You know, my mom had a chocolate lab, and I loved that dog. So I was like, yeah, I'll give a lab a shot. And, you know, she was only 6 months old. And she's like, yeah.
6 months?
Yeah,
wow.
She was...
It's a puppy.
Yeah. And I was like, she's already housebroken. She's already been, you know, spayed. And I was like, oh, perfect. Like, sign me up. So I brought her over, and, you know, I loved her. Her name was Harley. And I thought it was great. You know, I had a motorcycle accident, and then I get this dog named Harley. So we had, like, this inside joke, like, oh, yeah,
there you go.
I'm picking up my Harley today. And everyone's like, what? You're not getting another motorcycle. You can't. Like, don't do it.
This is interesting, the name. So you got her name like that before the accident.
Yeah, so I got Harley, and I don't think I had her a week before...
Oh, no. Are you serious? Before the accident?
No. I got her after the accident, remember?
Yeah.
And I had her about a week, and I think maybe 2 weeks. And it was the middle of the night, and she woke me up. She was shoving me. Wow. And I'm like, what in the world does this dog need? Like, it's the middle of the night. You know, I was already not happy about, like, getting a dog that was used to getting up early in the morning. And I kind of retrained her to wake up a little bit later and a little bit later.
Why she is waking up?
And she wakes me up in the middle of the night, and I'm like, what? And I remember just waking up and being like, oh no, like, my blood sugar's low.
Are you serious?
And
she could feel it.
She just woke me, like, this is amazing. So, like, I had to get into my wheelchair, rolling out to the kitchen.
Oh my lord, that's amazing.
And I was like, you know,
talk about pets,
what if I wouldn't have what if I wouldn't adopted her 2 weeks ago? Or what if I would have adopted
you
another
probably would
dog?
be dead by now.
And yeah, and they would have just, you know, so she's kind of been this little like guardian angel, so to speak of, because
she is.
Not only did she, you know, help with a couple. She's helped more than once with the low blood sugars. Like it's to the point.
Oh
now,
really? Wow, she can feel it. Oh.
Like anytime I'm sleeping and I have a blood sugar below like 40, like she'll come in and like push on me or nudge me with her cold nose to wake me up.
Wow.
And
that's amazing, actually.
But like I learned so much more from her because she was such a young dog. She was a puppy still.
6 months.
Like, yeah, so she pulled me out of my wheelchair a few times. And I'm like,
wow.
Well, now how do I get up off the ground, you know? And that's something that they never taught me in physical therapy. You know, they don't purposely throw you on the ground in physical therapy and like, get up. Like that's the advanced physical therapy, not the beginner. And so, you know, I figured it out and she was really good with it. Like once I fell out of the chair, she stayed put. She didn't run away or anything. And, you know, she would wait until I'd get back up in the chair and figure it out. And it was a learning curve for sure, but it's a skill that once you have it, it's invaluable because you fall out of your wheelchair all the time. It's just the fact
what do you mean all the time? How many times you fall?
I mean, accidentally, I've probably fallen out of my wheelchair 50 times.
And how did you get back?
So it all depends, and it all depends where you're at. Like if you're in a parking lot, you kind of look for a curb so that you can set the wheelchair off the curb.
Oh my god.
And then, you know,
the
chair's that much closer to the ground. You know, a lot of times if there's people around, people will help you.
People help? Okay, good.
Yeah, but you know, there's always that situation where, you know, you fall out, no one's around, what do you do? And if it wouldn't have been for the dog, I probably wouldn't know what to do.
Well, I'm glad you have your sister to help you.
Yeah.
She's great. Also, you have neighbors to help you. Now, I have a question. I know you have a friend that I've met several times here, and he's also amputee. And you guys do some sports, whatever it's. What do you guys do together?
So I've done a lot of different things since the accident. Just within this past year, I started hand cycling, which is basically a bicycle, but you cycle it with your hand. The challenge is one-handed, being able to cycle it and steer it.
With one hand, yeah.
With one hand,
very challenging.
It's not easy by any means. But in April of this past year, I competed in my first like 5K out in Pittsburgh.
Oh really? Wow!
And I had a couple of friends there to help.
Congratulations! Wow.
The course was not easy. So the one girl that does like marathons all the time, she's like, "Oh well, just pedal until you can't pedal anymore." And she's like, "I'll push you up the steep hills."
Oh, that's...
And then once I get to the top of the steep hills, then you just kind of bomb down the next one, and you just keep pedaling and pedaling until you get like to the top of the next one, and then she helps push you over the crest. But she was great. Like,
do you communicate with how many like people like yourself?
Amputees?
Yes.
Is
there as a group or?
I've met so many in the last 7 years. I don't think I can put a number on how many amputee friends.
So many? Wow, it's...
Like, between the kids camp that I volunteer at over the summer is a kids camp for amputees and kids with limb differences. And so, I mean, I believe this past year, I don't want to misquote it, but I believe we were somewhere around like 140 kids. And like somewhere between like 40 to 60 volunteer counselors, and all the counselors have a limb difference as well.
Wow. What would you... I'm just curious, what is the... I know there's different reasons of getting, you know, your limbs out. It could be accident, it could be, you know, many other reasons. What is the main reason, or most common reason to?
I think the biggest that I've seen has, as a whole, has been congenital amputees, like they were born with a limb difference. Yeah, so they're not really.
Interesting.
I mean, they are and they aren't considered an amputee because they didn't have anything to be amputated. They were just born that way, so they were born limb difference.
What percentage would you say that versus accidents and, you know?
I don't know. That'd have to be something you'd have to look up.
Okay.
I know that the Amputee Coalition's website kind of breaks it down.
So you do belong to Amputee Coalition? Are you part of, I mean, you a member of it, or you?
Yeah, I've been a peer, excuse me, I've been a peer visitor for them, doing what that gentleman did for me, you know, coming into the hospital and just offering any kind of words of encouragement, or, you know, there's a lot of questions in the beginning, like, how do I do this, or how does this happen, or, you know, are girls still going to want to date me? Because that's like the first thing on the forefront of your mind. You're like, oh, like, look at me now, like, nobody likes short guys, or nobody likes, you know, guys in a wheelchair, or this or that, and you have like this clouded vision of like what is acceptable and what isn't. And once you're put in that situation, you realize that you're no different than you were. I still have the exact same personality. Probably have a better personality now. I'm not as self-absorbed as I once was. Like, I was, you know, mid-20s, bartender, didn't think about anyone but myself. You know?
Only 32. So.
Yeah, so I mean, it's one of those things where I think as an able-bodied person, I had such a warped vision of what was socially acceptable and what I found attractive, versus now that I'm an amputee, I see things from that perspective. You know, I don't see somebody in a wheelchair and be like, oh, that's totally not for me, or that's not the kind of girl I want to date, or, you know, anything like that. Like, that just, it's a terrible thing to say that, you know, in the past, when I was able-bodied, I would have shied away from that just for fear of the unknown, you know, and you don't know what to expect, and you don't know what that is, so you just steer clear of it because it's not something you know.
Have you ever met an amputee before this happened to you, personally? Have you ever met somebody?
Yeah, I actually, I went to high school with a kid who was missing one of his arms. And I believe it was below the elbow, but high school was a few years ago, so I'm not 100% sure.
So how did you feel about that? Did you feel sorry for him, or did you feel like
I didn't feel sorry. I didn't feel sorry for him. It was again, it was one of those things that was different. I was never one of those people that was mean to people, or didn't associate with people just because of their differences. We were friends in high school. So we weren't close friends, but you know.
But you treated him as a normal person.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And then I'm trying to think if there was anyone else that was an amputee. I feel like there was before my accident, but I can't remember. Funny enough story. One of the guys I went to college with had an amputation not long after my accident. And
wait, after your accident?
After my accident, yeah.
Wow.
And his was based off of, like, he had like tumors in his leg or something, and they had to amputate it. And it was just crazy because, you know, we both went to college together. We were friends in college, you know, but lost contact after college. You know, we didn't really talk.
Okay.
And then he came to meet me in the hospital after my accident, or we reconnected, you know, after I was in like rehab and stuff, like. And it was just crazy that, like, you know, we were both like these able-bodied people 3 years ago, and then
there you go.
Here we are now, and we're both amputees. And he's actually been a huge help with my recovery process. Like
he's
been one of those people in my support group that, you know, I've just been able to count on time and time again. Like, hey, I have a doctor's appointment I need to get to, or hey, do you want to go hand cycling with me, or this with me, or try this out, or go to a support group.
Well, now, are you being supporting somebody like yourself? You know, people that supported you. Are you in a group that supports amputees?
So I go to random support groups, and anytime there's someone there that seems to be new, I'll, you know, try and chat them up and see what their story is and see if I can help.
That's nice of you.
But being like a peer visitor with the Amputee Coalition, they will randomly email you like, hey, there's this person, you know, can you email them? Can you call them? Can you talk to them and talk them through, you know, here's where they are in their recovery process, and here's, you know, questions they have maybe. And so they kind of link people up in that regard.
You belong to the group of support to amputees, right?
Yeah.
You do. All right. My last question is, you do have hobbies other than dogs?
Yeah. So, like I said, I started hand cycling this last year. That's kind of an expensive hobby. I've only been able to do it with borrowed bicycles because it's just one of those things that I like to do it. But I don't like it enough to go out and buy, you know, a $7,500 bicycle. You know, that's just not in my wheelhouse right now. But I also have just started this year adaptive snowboarding again.
Oh, you did?
And the past 2 years I've tried the adaptive sit skiing. And I got to do a little bit more of that earlier this year at an event called the Hartford Ski Spectacular out in Breckenridge, Colorado. And that's put on by Disabled Sports USA. And it is an event unlike any other. Like, everybody that's there loves snow sports. Everybody that's there has the same goal in mind, just get down the hill as fast as they can, you know. So I started the week off adaptive sit skiing because it was what I had known over the past 2 years. And you know, I got a few runs in, and then by the end of the week we were like, you know what, I talked to one of the prosthetists out there. He let me borrow a snowboard setup that he had brought with him to the event. And by the end of the week I was up snowboarding again, which felt amazing for the first time in, you know, 7 years. So
oh, that's great. Yeah, you need to enjoy what you have. So you have friends, pets, support groups, and hobbies.
Yeah.
And yeah, very, very lucky man, I should say that.
Thank you.
No, thank you for sharing your story. Is there anything you would like to say, like in one sentence, to the audience who is watching us right now? Inspirational?
No, I don't know.
You don't?
I feel like I don't want to be known as an inspirational person because, you know, I just try and go out and live my life the best way that I can.
That's inspirational.
Since my accident, you know.
But
I don't want to be inspirational to people. I just want them to
know that
I can still live my life, even though it's different than it was before. It's still
life.
It's still
and it's
life,
beautiful.
and it's still the same life. So. Oh, thank you. So I have a GoFundMe started for this season of snowboarding. It's really important to me, as you heard me say earlier. This year I got to go to the Hartford Ski Spectacular event, which was a great event, and it got me back to snowboarding. And now that I've gotten back to it, I only want to further my abilities in the adaptive snowboard world. I want to go on to hopefully one day be a competitor in adaptive snowboard cross or adaptive banked slalom. So if you can follow the GoFundMe page in the description and at the bottom of the page, it's basically to get me back out on the slopes, any necessary prosthetic gear and snowboard equipment that needs to be purchased. And I also have another upcoming surgery that unfortunately can't be done locally, and I'm going to have to travel to have completed. So any donations, any shares, any likes that can get my story out there and can get donations to this GoFundMe would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.